Hello and welcome to Torah Thoughts. I want to start by expressing a prayer that everyone who has been affected by this terrible disease, the coronavirus, should become healthy very soon, have a complete recovery, and may this disease not spread anymore, and may it not take any more innocent lives. And I hope that everyone out there will join me in this particular prayer. And I hope that every time somebody watches a video like this or any other Torah-related video, or shares a video, or helps spread any of the Torah ideas, that should the merit of that act should lead towards an end to this terrible situation. Now, the Torah portion that we read this week is Parshat Tisa. And this parsha is known as the parsha that contains an episode, one of the worst episodes, one of the most horrifying episodes in Jewish history. And that's where the Jews, following the greatest moment in our history when we received the Torah, 40 days after that, they created a golden calf and worshipped it as a god. So this parsha ought to be known as a parsha that has some terrible, terrible portions of it. It's a very sad parsha. But in fact, it's not. Because this parsha also contains some of the the brightest moments in our history. It contains the moments when God not only forgave us for that terrible sin, but offered Moshe the formula for that particular forgiveness, and we actually applied that formula every Yom Kippur. And I'm going to get back to that. But when I was preparing my thoughts for this week's, for the video that I was going to make on Tisa, it dawned upon me that the events that have been going on this week, the whole coronavirus events that's been going on, this is not just any old news story. This is an event of, it's epic. This is something that has never happened in modern history. Countries have shut down. States of emergency have been declared all over, and everyone understands that. In most places, they are not allowing public gatherings of more than 100 people. Do you understand what that is? What constitutionalists in the United States would say to something like that? The right to peaceful assembly? But nobody complains because everyone understands the gravity of the situation. That's how big this is. Now, I'm not saying this to cause any panic. God forbid. In fact, I think that we shouldn't spread any panic. I said in a video that I recorded this past Purim, and I said it comically, that the thing we have to fear most is the fear of coronavirus itself. But the truth of the matter is that that's actually the case. Fear is our worst enemy, and I'm not trying to spread any panic, but we do need to take this thing seriously. We do need to take all the steps that are being taken, and in fact, that is what will hopefully stop this epidemic. This is also, like I said, it's something that's never been seen before in modern history, but at the same time, this is an opportunity. We can stop a deadly pandemic virus before it kills millions of people, and that's something that's never been done before either. So we're living through an incredible time in history right now, and so it dawned upon me that this is something that there's no question about it. As we're experiencing it, there must be something in the Torah that addresses it. And so I started to reread the Torah portion again from that perspective, and I have to tell you, what I read, it blew my mind. And I'm going to start with, to begin with, Tisa means when you shall take up, or rather when you shall gather. And what's going on here is God is having Moshe do a census of how many people there are among the nation of Israel, and he's telling Moshe, no, you're not going to take a head count. What you're going to do is you're going to have everyone provide a coin. Everyone's going to donate a silver coin worth a half a shekel, and then you count up all the coins, and that way you see how many people there are. The reason for that, Rashi explains, is because to do an actual head count is called an ayin hara. It's like a bad omen. It invites the evil spirits, so to speak, to try to come into the world and get permission from God to cause damage, so to speak. So anyway, so you don't do a head count. God here tells us You're not going to do a head count. It says, "V'natnu ish kofer nafsho Hashem." Each person shall give a ransom or a something to redeem for his soul to God. Now, I just want to mention that it's been pointed out to me that the words kofer nafsho Lashem, a ransom or a redemption for his soul to God. If you take the first and last letter of each of those three words, you get kaf, resh, nun, vav, lamed, and hey. If you scramble the words, you get the word la corona. So here we are, Rashi telling us that this peculiar method of counting how many people there are in the nation is done to avoid a plague. And here you get something that may be far-fetched, it may not be, but you're going to redeem your soul. Somehow, maybe or maybe not, there's an allusion to the word la corona, to corona. And then the next word is bifkod otam, when you will redeem them, v'lo yeh behem negef, and there will not be a plague among them, bifkod otam, as you count them. So Rashi explains something quite interesting, that in order to avoid a plague, this is done in order to avoid a plague, as what happened in when King David actually did a head count, and that was in Samuel 2, chapter 24. And I want to come back to that a little bit later, because that relates very much to what's happening in today's news. But I want to move on to the next piece, which pretty much just screams at you right there. No elaboration necessary. I'm just going to read verbatim what it says in the Torah, the very next segment of the Torah. V'asita kiyur nechoshet, and you shall make a copper stand, or a faucet, or a fountain. You make a copper fountain, v'chano nechoshet, and its faucet will be of copper, lerachza, to wash. V'natata oto, ben ohel moed, uvein hamizbeach. You shall put them in between the tent of the gathering, meaning it's the tent where the priests would gather to perform their duties, uben hamizbeach, and the altar. V'natata shamayim, you put water in it. So basically, you will create a fountain. You'll put a fountain where the priests are about to perform the service, and put water in it. V'rachzu Aaron uvanav mimenu et yadeim v'tragleim, and Aaron, the high priest, and his sons will wash from that fountain their hands and their legs. Bevoam el oel moed, when they come to the tent of the meeting, yirchatzu mayim, they will wash with water. So that's repeated a second time. They'll wash with water. V'lo yimatu, so that they don't die. Or begishtam el hamizbeach, or when they approach the altar, lasharet, to do their service, laktir ishel Hashem, to perform the offering of incense to God. And now again it repeats, v'rachatzu yadeim v'ragleim, and they shall wash their hands and feet. V'lo yimatu, you shall wash your hands and feet before you approach, so that you don't die. V'haya lahem chok olam, and it shall be for them a rule forever. Lo, to him, meaning to the high priest Aaron, Ulazarod, and for his offspring, the Dorotam, for all the generations. And I just find that absolutely amazing. Enough said. You'll wash your hands before you approach so that you don't die. If that doesn't say to us that it's relating to today's situation, I don't know what possibly can. But anyway, so moving on, again, God doesn't just put something in the Torah to show us, you see, I mentioned it. There's a lesson here. So I want to go back to what Rashi said. We don't do a direct head count in order to avoid a plague, as what happened with King David. Now I want to go and read what happened to King David in the second book of Shmuel, of Samuel, chapter 24. King David did a head count, and as a result, the Navi Gad came to him and said, now God is going to, you've opened the doors to something horrible. And so King David felt very, very bad about that, obviously. And God told him that God offered King David three options. There can be this horror that's going to befall the nation of Israel. Yeah, he's offering you three options. One is a famine that's going to last 7 years. Another is for 30 days your enemies will defeat you in battle after battle after battle. They'll chase you down. And the third option is a plague that will last 3 days. And King David chose the plague. And the reason why he chose it was, he says, I would rather fall into God's hands than rely on man. What does he mean by that? If there's a famine, you're relying on those with resources to survive the famine. which means you're relying on the richest people among the country, and he didn't want to rely on them. And if there is a heavy loss in battle, you're relying upon the enemy's mercy with respect to how many people they're going to kill. If there's a plague, you're relying on God to have mercy and withhold the severity of the plague, and that's why he chose the plague. Another reason is because the plague affects everyone equally, unlike famine, which affects those who don't have means, and battle affects those who are weaker more than those who are stronger. So anyway, as the story goes, the plague spreads throughout Israel, and as the angel of death he arrives in Jerusalem, God tells him to stop. And he arrived at the house of a man named Arvana, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Arvana a Chuti, he was a Chiti, he was a Hittite. And God said to the angel, stop, enough. And then God sends the prophet to King David and says to him, go to this person, to Aravna, and purchase the land that he owns. And on that land build an altar and bring a sacrifice to God, and that will put an end to the plague. So King David goes ahead and he does exactly that, and the plague stops, and it turns out that that land that he bought was what? Our Har Habayit, the temple, our Temple Mount, where later on King Solomon, King David's son, built the temple, where the second temple was built later on, Herod's temple, and where we will hopefully one day build the third temple. The significance of that? Well, something very interesting is taking place today in Israel. An election has been taking place for a year now. After 3 rounds of voting, there's still no clear majority. They may even go to a 4th round, who knows. But while all this is going on, Pesach is approaching. And there's a mitzvah upon us, whether there is a temple or not, to bring the Pesach sacrifice, to slaughter a lamb and roast it, and have that as your Pesach dinner. And there's an organization that went ahead and asked for a permit to go up to the Temple Mount, build a temporary altar, just like King David, exactly like King David did. Go up there, build a temporary altar, have a Korban Pesach, and do it on behalf, as a messenger, so to speak, on behalf of the entire Jewish nation, and eat that, for Pesach dinner. Who knows? That may or may not be a parallel to the story of King David, and that may or may not be the answer to stopping this terrible plague. Unfortunately, I doubt that the leaders in Israel will grab that opportunity. In fact, one of the factions trying to build a government in Israel right now wants to rely on the 15 members of the Arab Party, the United Arab Front, to make a government. And among the conditions that the United Arab Front gave this party to do this is make it a law that no Jews are allowed to go up in the Temple Mount. So it's a very, very interesting point that in this week the Torah alludes to a story that happened with King David, where stopping a plague was dependent on having the Jews take possession, King David that is, take possession of the Temple Mount, build an altar, and bring a sacrifice. And here we have, on the one hand, there are Jews who want to do that. I doubt they're going to be given permission to. I hope they will. And on the other hand, we have leaders in the country who are willing to make it a law that Jews cannot go up to the Temple Mount just so that they can have power. Anyway, I want to fast forward now, back to our parsha. I want to fast forward to the time where, again, the Jews have received the Ten Commandments. Moses is up on the mountain, 40 days and 40 nights, receiving the Torah, in essence, from God. And when he comes down, he discovers, or actually while he's still up on the mountain, God tells him that the Jews have made this golden calf. And he says to Moshe, I'm going to destroy the nation. And Moshe says to him, remember the promise that you made to the patriarchs, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. You can't let them down. Now, he didn't mean you can't destroy them because then your promise won't be kept. Because he did tell Moshe, I'll make a great nation out of you. You're a descendant of them, so my promise will be kept. But Moshe was in essence saying to them, if those 3 were not enough to inspire the nation not to sin, how is it that just I will be enough? The point being, though, he alludes to the 3 patriarchs, and God says, okay, you're right. I will withhold my anger. And the word for I will withhold, v'yinachem. He says, v'yinachem al hara amecha, withhold the evil from the nation. And then it says, 2 verses later, v'yinachem Hashem al hara. And God withheld the punishment. The interesting thing about that is that in the story with King David, when God withholds the plague, it also says v'yinachem Hashem. But anyway, Moses comes down. There's a tremendous punishment to the leadership of the people who did the golden calf. And then it says that God sent a plague to the people, to the leaders, to the ringleaders of that golden calf. So we have here in this parsha 2 times a direct mention of a plague, and we so far have seen an allusion to how to end the plague, or at least prevent it. And then God says to Moshe, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm not going to lead them anymore. You're going to lead them. I'm going to send an angel to lead you. And Moshe begins to beg him in 3 stages. And God, first he says, no, I can't have an angel lead me. I need you to lead me. And God says, okay, fine. I'll lead you. I'll be ahead, and then you'll follow me, but you're going to be the one to lead the nation. And Moshe says, well, no, I need you among us. But before he says that, Moshe he seems like things are going well in his conversation with God, and he's asking to deepen his relationship with God, apparently. And he says to him, I want to see you. And God says to him, nobody sees me. Any human being who sees me can't live. But God says to him, I'll allow you to see me from behind, which is a very difficult thing to understand. Of course, God doesn't have a physical manifestation, so when he sees God from behind, we can't figure out exactly what that means, and I'm sure there's plenty of experts who discuss the meaning of that. But be that as it may, God says, well, I'm going to pass by you, before you, and I will proclaim the name of God, meaning he says he's going to proclaim his own name. And Rashi explains what it means by that. Rashi explains that he taught Moshe at this point. He taught Moshe 13 of his attributes that begin with his name. These the list of 13 begins with his name: Hashem, Kel, Rachum, V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed, V'Emes, Notze Chesed Alafim, Nose Avon, V'Pesha, V'Chata, V'Nakeh. The exact distinction between all of these 3 attributes of mercy, I personally don't know all of it, and it's a very interesting study. Under different conditions, God gives us different levels of mercy. But in any event, Rashi explains, God is saying to Moshe, you used the 3 patriarchs as an argument to get me to stop punishing the Jews. There's going to come a time when that's not going to be enough. And if you're going to be an advocate for this people, you're going to need more ammo. So here's God not only saying, I forgive them for what they did with the golden calf, but I'm going to give you the ammo that you need to argue on their behalf in the future. And of course, God passes by Moses. He holds his hand, so to speak, over Moses so Moses can't see him, removes his hand, and Moses sees him from behind, whatever that means. And that's when Moses calls out the names of the 13 attributes that God had just taught him. Now, this is such a special moment, because that recitation is what we allude to. It's what we repeat on Yom Kippur again and again and again to remind God to forgive us. What we see from this parsha here is, when God gives us a problem, when God gives us darkness, he also gives us a flashlight. God gave us this plague. He gave us a solution. It may or may not be that thing on the Temple Mount, but it certainly has to do with obeying him. And one final thing I want to say, what happened later on, after that, Moshe says to God, you got to go among us. You can't lead from far ahead. You got to move among us. And God says, okay, fine, I'll do that. I'm going to make a deal with you. Here's the deal. And he starts a list of things. And the first thing he says is, when we come into the land of Israel, you got to kick out the nation that lives there, that you're taking this land from. How amazing is that? At a time where we're negotiating with our enemy to become part of our government. The second thing he says is, Pesach. You must keep the holiday of Pesach. Eat matzah, bring a sacrifice, etc. And there's a few other things, but those are the first 2 things that God says. Again, God provides the solution every time he gives the problem. It's up to us to listen. Hopefully we will, and this whole mess will be behind us, God willing, really, really soon. That's my Torah thought. What's yours? Thanks for watching. Shabbat Shalom.